Welcome to In the Telling. I'm Stephen G. Forwood.
And I'm Miranda Mims, and we are the co-founders of the Nomadic Archivist Project.
I would like to welcome our guest today, Carla Whyte, an educator from Brooklyn, New York. She's been teaching for about a decade, first in South Korea, then Liberia, Guinea, France, and now back in New York. Carla studied sociology in undergrad. She became fascinated by race relations in professional and collegiate spaces, as well as disparities in educational access, particularly for Black people. While she enjoys teaching, Carla also has an interest in tapping into her creative side through blogging and podcasting. Today, she would like to talk about the challenges of self-development. As the only person in her immediate family to participate extensively in therapy, Carla would like to share stories about what it means to strive to be well in a toxic family environment. We are very excited to have you with us on In the Telling. Welcome, Carla.
Thank you.
Welcome, Carla. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Pretty good, pretty good.
Yeah.
I just want to start by saying I met Carla years ago when she was working as a page at the Schomburg Center. And she struck me as someone who was actually going places. And over the years, you have proven to me over the last decade that you've been quite a few places. And so, and as when I asked you to come on the podcast, I was very interested in how you would frame a family story, right, for the podcast. And you talked about going into therapy to improve your life and what it means in terms of building healthy relationships with your family. So I want to start at the beginning. I want to ask you, where did you grow up?
So I'm from Brooklyn, born and raised. My family started off in the East Flatbush section of Brooklyn. And then we moved around a little bit. We also lived in Prospect Heights. And then we finally settled in Canarsie. My mom was like adamant about being a homeowner. So back in like the late 90s is when we came over to Canarsie, and it had a very different feel, a very different reputation than it currently does now.
So you're also a child of African and Caribbean immigrants, right?
Caribbean. My dad is from Guyana, and my mom is from Grenada. So, yeah.
So, and how did that impact your home life?
I mean, I think so I have two sisters. And I think we grew up like very, do your homework, do your chores. Not a lot of, let's have a little fun. My parents were sticklers for making sure that like the home was, tidy, and that our homework assignments were done, and we were always learning. My mom, she would like make us, watch Reading Rainbow, and she would ask us questions about what we learned on Reading Rainbow. My dad had my godfather laminate an entire booklet of the multiplication tables from 1 through 13, and he would quiz us randomly on, our multiplication tables. To this day, he doesn't know that sometimes I cheated. And like he had his copy and I had my copy, and I would hide on one side of the bed. I would be sitting down and I would have the pamphlet in front of me, and he wasn't paying attention. So he's like on the other side of his bed. He's just like, what's 4 times 3? And I'm like, 12. And I didn't realize at the time that like all you need to do to figure out the next number in the times table is add 4, add 5.
Yeah,
right.
But yeah, we were that kind of family, like book reports from the encyclopedia, going to the library to take out books all the time. I think that my parents just very much had this understanding and this attitude that like we came to this country to, seek out better economic opportunities, and we're not going to squander that, and we're not going to let our children squander that. And so while I feel like they did a great job of making sure that my sisters and I were, taken care of and looked after, and we had, goals, and we weren't just being degenerates or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I do think there is a social emotional component of raising children that just that we didn't necessarily get. Like, we didn't necessarily learn how to, talk to each other when we had problems or issues. We didn't necessarily learn how to express our emotions or feelings toward one another. We were not the family that would, go on fun trips and everyone's just like, let's play games, let's sing songs. It wasn't that kind of thing. It was more of a, dang, we gotta ride together for 2 hours, all of us, like, for real.
I see. I see.
Yeah, so it was that kind of situation.
So what led you to therapy? I was curious, related to this. Was it the idea that that you felt something was missing in your development, emotional and sort of emotional development with your family? What led you to therapy?
What led me to therapy was actually not related to my family.
Okay.
What led me to therapy was, just having a really bad dating life and just wondering, like, what is wrong with me? Like, why can't I just seem to meet a person who, like, thinks I'm dope and have this great personality and, just like wants to keep taking me on dates and go on trips with me and stuff like that. I was just like, what's wrong with me? Like, I don't get it. So that was like the reason I sought out therapy. But I think that through therapy is how I started to learn, a lot of things about myself. And I learned about certain trauma from, childhood and how that played a role into like the way that I interacted with other people, the way that I thought about myself, etc. So, yeah.
And through doing this, when you started learning more through this experience in therapy, did you bring it back to your family and start talking with your siblings or your parents about some of the things, some of your thoughts that you were sort of experiencing during that time period?
Not everything, and definitely not some of the more profound things. I've definitely, like, both of my sisters know that I've been in therapy, and I've talked to them about, a couple of different things that have come up with my therapist, but like, we haven't discussed everything. And what I do feel like it's really hard to be a person who's kind of learning about being reflective, being introspective, being more assertive and direct when you have traditionally learned to be passive aggressive or just passive. It's interesting when you are a person who's like doing that work and trying to get better at those things, but the people around you are not necessarily doing that work. So like, I can have, conversations to an extent about certain things that I've discussed with my therapist, but like, no one else in my family is going to therapy and kind of having those conversations with someone and unpacking their trauma, their baggage, becoming self-aware. So I feel like when we exchange, there's a limit to how profoundly the knowledge can permeate because we're not all doing the self work to kind of understand, well, what are my biases and like, how am I contributing to XYZ, if that makes sense.
It does. It was the idea, the introspective part of what you're saying. So sometimes when folks are going through therapy, they take it back to their partners or their family or even, the workplace, what have you. And they sort of demonstrate, as you said, you can go so far in terms of speaking more directly rather than passive aggressively or simply passive. Do you feel like that by modeling a particular kind of behavior that you've seen some changes in a way that people respond to you, whether it's your siblings or your parents?
No.
Well,
and that's the sad part, because it's just like, the work doesn't just need to be done by one person. It needs to be done by everybody. And so I definitely feel like, like, on the outside looking in, sometimes I just feel like, damn, like these interactions are so toxic, and like, what are y'all doing? Like, the way that we communicate is terrible. Like, what is happening here? No, no, no. Like, what are you doing? But I don't really feel like there's anything that I can do about it. So, I just
it's hard to
do my little part.
Right.
Yeah.
It's hard to create new rituals in spaces that are so ingrained in thinking and feeling a certain way, like you said, with sort of this either passive model or just trying to move forward in life and not have other things, other baggage, other thoughts sort of impact that that movement. And so, yeah, I mean, it's really hard, even if you're doing the work, to sort of create those rituals with the people around us.
Yeah, I mean, like,
if they're not interested, or if they don't see the benefits
or the value.
yeah, I was actually having a conversation with my dad a few days ago, and that was actually when I got the idea to say that I wanted to talk about the whole, just like toxicity and the way that we've learned to communicate with one another. So my folks, like I said before, they're homeowners, and they have a 2-family home here in Canarsie. And when I came back from Paris in 2018, I had just gotten a new job here. I did not want to look for a new apartment at the same time that I was starting a new job. So I told myself, you know what? My parents have a 3-bedroom apartment upstairs. It's, pretty much empty. My sister had taken one room and she was there by herself. And so I was just like, I'll just, be up there for the time being. They'll be my landlords for a little bit. I'll pay them rent. It'll be fine. It'll work. And so recently, my sister decided that she wanted the walls painted. They've been yellow for a very long time, and she's just like, this yellow is so ugly. And so my dad was just like, okay, sure, like I'll paint the walls white. Very seemingly simple task, right? And so my sister was just like, well, when are you going to do it? Because I kind of want it to be done soon. It's something that I've been talking to you about for a while. And you still haven't done it. And so my dad is just like, well, what's the rush? We under quarantine. Nobody's going anywhere. Nobody's doing anything. What's the rush? And I was just like, it's not that there's a rush, but it's like, this is something that my sister wants to do. You have said that you are going to help her do it. She would like to get the ball rolling. You know what I mean? And, I told him historically, whenever people have asked you to do, things, that tends to be your response. It's like, oh yeah, I'll do it. But like when I feel like it, and you never really give anyone like a time frame or anything like that, which is why sometimes we have decided, you know what, I'm going to go outside to a friend or pay someone or whatever to do it, because it's just like, if you've offered to help me with this thing, I would like for you to help me with this thing. Let's agree on a time to start and end, just like let's just be organized about it if we're going to do it, And
Absolutely.
So, me having that conversation with him, like my sister told me, she was like, I appreciate you saying that to him, because I don't think he got it. But I was just, in my mind, I'm just like, why does this have to be so complicated? Like, you've offered a service, right? Don't say like, oh yeah, I'm going to do this thing for you. But then it's like, well, when I feel like it. And then it's just like, if we bring it up later and say like, hey, when are you going to do this thing? Why are you rushing me? I said I was going to do it. Leave me alone. Like it's kind of been that kind of attitude. And, you're made to feel like a bad person for even asking. And I was just like, this is crazy. Like, I'm not a bad person for asking. I'm not a bad person for having boundaries. He finally came. He started the paint job. Apparently, he told my sister that he was going to come upstairs at around 10 a.m. to start, painting. He did not tell me that, nor did my sister relay the message to me. So I was in the kitchen cooking. And he's like, I said I was going to come up here at 10 o'clock. you in the kitchen cooking, I'm gonna get pain in your food. And I'm just like, okay, like it's fine. I'll be done in about 30 minutes. And he's like, well, you knew I was coming up here. And I was just like, I didn't know you were coming up here actually.
Communication.
Time.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, but maybe if you had told me that you were coming up here to paint, I would have been able to, modify my schedule accordingly. Like, that's all it is. And so he's just like, listen, man, I don't want to argue with nobody. I just want to come up here and paint. And I'm like, okay, but like, you're yelling at me and I'm not supposed to say anything? Like the whole reason why we're having this conversation is because you had an expectation of me that I didn't even know about. Like, I'm totally fine to help you with that expectation, but like, you have to communicate with me. And me saying something about it is not me nagging you, is not me starting an argument. I'm just communicating about the fact that I didn't know that you had this expectation of me. Do better next time. That's it.
Is your family close with your grandparents? You see if there is a pattern with this type of family dynamic with your father and his parents or your grandparents?
Well, I didn't know my grandparents on my dad's side. Like, I never met them.
Okay.
And yeah, I don't really know much about my grandparents on my dad's side. I don't even know if they were alive when I was born, because when he left Guyana when he was 18. He went to Grenada. He was in Grenada for 10 years. That's where he met my mom. And then they came to New York. So I really don't know that much about my dad's side of the family.
Okay.
My mom's parents, I met my maternal grandmother a couple of times in my life before she passed. But I could imagine that the communication, in their families was probably even more toxic, because I'm just like, I'm pretty sure my mom wasn't necessarily telling her dad or her mom, like, hey, you're a poor communicator. You need to learn to communicate better. Like, if I had to make an assumption, I would assume that those conversations were not happening. And so there is, to an extent, like, I do understand, like, our parents have been doing the best that they could, and they've been doing what they've been doing based on what they know. And so I think that that's also what makes it very hard to be in a place where you're trying to work on self, you're trying to be more like aware of your own baggage, but like, you also can't teach an old dog new tricks.
Right. Yeah. Did your dad ever talk about his family or his relationship with his parents, even though you never met them?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess we could have asked, and I feel like there have been instances where we have, but we don't really get much. And because we didn't really grow up like, being all chummy and close and stuff like that, it wasn't like a huge, priority to kind of find out like what was happening there on that side of the family. We just always kind of, we've just kind of accepted it. Like, we don't really know much about his side, and that's that. Because we feel like, I think we grew up feeling like if he wanted us to know, he would have shared. Like, you're the adult, so.
So I was curious about, because I'm always saying I'm curious about something over and over again. So my feeling after listening to different parts of your story is that, what do you feel therapy has given you in terms of learning how to best communicate with your family and with others?
Learning, well, definitely that, there's some conversations where it's just going to be best to not engage. That's really all, in my opinion, that's really all you can do. Just definitely pick your battles. And especially because, I'm now technically a tenant of theirs. It's just like, I definitely want there to just be as much peace and harmony as we possibly can have. And so if that means that, our interactions together have to be limited and that certain boundaries have to be super strong, then it is what it is. But I think I'm also in a space where I'm realizing that I can't be here for too much longer.
Okay.
Because I do feel like, like sometimes you just gotta love people from a distance.
Mm-hmm.
And especially when the desire to have a more healthy relationship is one-sided.
It's good that you're talking about this right now because I think a lot of people are probably feeling this way, especially as we are now all forced to be inside
Mhm.
and to be in spaces that we may not have been in this type of a way. So I'm sure a lot of people are trying to think about how to manage relationships that were already complicated, but now being forced to be with each other for almost 24 hours a day, day in, day out for who knows how long. It's probably bringing up a lot of emotion
Mhm.
for a lot of folks out there where their home lives are just really complicated.
Yep.
Yeah. And the other day, I actually I had a conversation with both of my parents. Like I went downstairs and just like was talking to them, giving them an update about my job search, because I recently did step away from my teaching job because, mental health. The
Mm-hmm.
teacher struggle in New York is real. And I did resign from my role, and I was very confident and optimistic about my ability to find something else. And
Mm-hmm.
so it was just something that I genuinely feel like I needed to do. And then, I've actually had 3 different job opportunities kind of tell me, hey, with the nature of this whole corona thing, we're just going to have to put,
Mm-hmm.
this interview process on pause. Like I literally had gotten an offer from one place and they were just like,
Yeah,
we can't bring anybody on. And then
right.
2 other places, they were like, we want you to move forward to the second interview, the final round. And then right before that happened, it was just like, hey, we actually are not going to forward you to the final round right now, but we
Right.
will revisit this in a couple of weeks.
Mhm.
So that was kind of, like shattering to like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
to my ego or whatever. And so I just like let my parents know, what was going on, just so that they were in the know, because, they are my landlords technically.
Yes.
Um, and so after that, we just ended up having like a conversation about, politics and this and that, and whatever, whatever. And I was just like, okay, so, this is a side of them that I don't really get to see that often.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that, so what I'm realizing is that my parents are definitely open to like having conversations with their kids about, I think about, certain topics that don't necessarily force them to kind of evaluate themselves, because I think that's when they often shut down.
Okay.
Um, but I do feel like they are open to, and they want to, be able to just like talk to us in general. And that's something that growing up I didn't necessarily feel. Like
Okay.
I always felt like, they hate me, they don't want to talk to me. And so I never tried. And I've also kind of felt like, I'm the kid. Like, like
Mm-hmm.
like why do I have to be the one to initiate this like healthy dialogue and stuff like that? Like I'm supposed to be learning that from you. You're supposed to be modeling that from me and like instilling that in me. I shouldn't have to go see that outside and then have to always be the one that's just like, okay, well,
Mm-hmm.
you just cussed me out 20 minutes ago, but like now let's talk about, petunias or whatever. Like it's just, I've
I
been
see.
very salty about that.
But I wanted to ask you one last question. What would you like the audience to know about your experience in general? More specifically, um, toxicity in the family, communication. Um,
Um, I would say like be open to the process of talking about and learning how certain things that you've dealt dealt with in the past are still impacting the decisions that you make today. Like I think um in our community, we shy away from, issues around mental health. We shy away from therapy. I still hear some of my friends say like, oh, you don't gotta pay no therapist. You could just talk to me. I'm like, no, it's not the same thing.
Yes.
And I think that it definitely should become a much more normal part of our conversation. Like as a teacher, I've definitely, worked with a lot more people who are in therapy and who are open to talking about it and are very comfortable talking about it. But, there's still some spaces where I feel like I know some folks who are just like, I don't need therapy. Like what's therapy going to do for me? And so I would say, just be open to the process of having another person whose literal job it is to help you unpack and understand your baggage and your trauma. And I think if everyone was more open to doing that, we would, be a little bit more compassionate. We would think before we speak. We would consider different perspectives in the decisions that we make, the things that we say, how we handle another person. If I know that I want to have a solid relationship with this person who I care about, but I also want to let them know that they have hurt my feelings in some way, there's probably I probably should go into the conversation, from a standpoint of, hey, I'm telling you this because I want us to fix it, versus going into the conversation being very combative.
Okay.
So yeah, just like be open to the process of, evaluating yourself. Like literally everyone has baggage, everyone. So don't count out therapy.
But just thank you. What a really heartfelt rendering of, and some anecdotes about you and your family. We really appreciate you coming on today, Carla.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for being here with us. I really appreciate it. We hope I hope your room came out well with the paint.
It definitely looks better now that it's in white.
Nice. Carla Whyte. So, and also good luck on your job search. I hope that turns around for you very soon.
Ooh, thank you. Me too.
But thank you for your words of inspiration today, Carla. We'll see you next time.